Hello there. Welcome to Behind the Scenes at AV Rant. Yes, this is the live on-air recording. We are behind the scenes, in case you can't tell by my green screen, and Tom futzing with his hair.
Can you even see that? I don't think they can see that. It's just...
I don't know. It might have been the first thing they saw, because I think it was the camera was on you, because you made a noise in your microphone when the thing first went live. In any case, if you're wondering why there might be audio dropouts or images we're referencing that you're not able to see in this version, it's because it's behind the scenes. So if you'd like everything cleaned up, particularly the audio for sure cleaned up and being able to see the images that we're talking about, look for the full version. They're listed under the names Home Theater Q&A, AV Rant Home Theater Q&A podcast with the number. This will be number 608. So those usually go up on Wednesdays. And yeah, that's the preamble. With that, I'll switch over to Tom. He can begin whenever he pleases.
Writing an email.
Okay. It's thrilling behind the scenes stuff.
Uh-huh.
How come you always do your emails when it's podcast time?
Because the email, I haven't opened this computer like all day.
Right.
It just...
This must be a very important email.
No.
Of course not. Yep, that's what you tune in for, folks.
This is the big stuff. All right, where are we at? Okay, hold on. And I can never find on here. Okay, because I don't understand what the numbers are. 55.1.00. What is that? Apparently, it's 1 minute 48 seconds.
Yeah.
I don't understand why there's these weird. Is it 50?
Yeah, that I wouldn't get.
I don't understand where these numbers come from. Anyways, it's very confusing.
Maybe it's frames.
Could be. I guess it seems like it's every 2 seconds.
With 24 frames a second?
Every 2 seconds is
30 frames a second.
35 frames a second. Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, whatever. Oh, here you go. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. I put out a little tease earlier this week on Twitter, or I guess it was technically last week on Twitter.
You teased? What are you teasing?
I put out a little tease. Well, it's in our. It'll come up in our comments section. I have a short story to tell. So
is that the thing that I don't understand? Because it just says
it's cryptic.
It's very cryptic. I was like, huh.
That's right.
Okay. I thought maybe
shared.
I missed an email.
Nope.
Which I would have just gotten just now.
Yeah, that's right.
That's when I check it. All right. This is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can come to www.avrant.com and try to leave a comment.
There?
Yes, yeah. If you can make it work. I don't know. WordPress has been really weird lately.
Yeah, it has.
It's been very, very odd. I'm not sure what's going on. You go to a better way is facebook.com/AVRant podcast, which they seem to keep making that work somehow. YouTube.com/AVRant. You can also contact us directly at rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @FirstReflect. I'm Tom @avrant.com. My Twitter is @avrant_Tom. So let's begin with our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, it's to support the podcast in some way. What way? One way is financially. You go to www.avrant.com and click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. Apparently, we'll get to this in a second.
Yeah.
Or at some point here, but it won't work on the mobile version. I don't know why.
Nope.
But
that doesn't show up. And actually, our Patreon link has vanished off of our page too, so I don't know if we can bring that back. Tom's going to check it right now. AVRant.com.
I have to just put A. It's like maybe AV. Yeah. It just goes automatically. It has disappeared. I just checked that the other day because it was being weird.
It has been being.
And what is all this stuff up here?
I don't know.
No, that's not. That's not. Okay. It just looks.
That's just a Google ad.
That's just a Google ad. Okay.
There you go. Fun times at the website. But in any case, if you come to the desktop version of AVRant.com, you will be able to find the support the podcast over on the right-hand side. That will work. And a couple of people did that.
Yeah, it will work eventually because I have to fix it again. The support the podcast thing still works, but whatever.
You can go directly to Patreon at least.
Yeah. Look up AV Rant. We're there. Patreon. Okay. Yeah. So Chad and Brian did that. They went to our Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and it sends them to a PayPal donation site. PayPal does all that and just sends us our cut. So we want to thank Chad and Brian for that.
Yeah. Chad, Brian, thank you both very much for the donations.
And we want to thank our 68 patrons over at patreon.com, which doesn't have a link on our site anymore for some reason. But Patreon is a service where you sign up and they monthly will take money out of your account and give most of it to us. So you can go to patreon.com and look that up. And we want to thank our 68 patrons, including Ilango, who was mentioned that he had been doing that.
That's right. So that's patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you would like to sign up, it's basically like a monthly subscription. $1 is the minimum. Infinity is the maximum. And Alongo let us know he's one of our patrons. So thank you.
Yeah, if you click on any one of the podcast links at the bottom of the podcast, if you the show notes, there is the Patreon support thing. So that is there. I don't know why the other thing disappeared, but whatever.
Had a banner. Don't anymore.
Don't anymore. We also want to thank Miguel. Miguel went to HSU and told them that he bought his VTF2 Mark V sub because of us. So if you let somebody know or in any way support the podcast, in any way, even if it's not financial, let us know. We will mention you. So thank you, Miguel.
Yeah, Miguel, congrats on that purchase. And thank you for talking us up to HSU.
I am highly regretting not bringing water in here. All right. In the news, just a brief update to our news from last week. Now that North American model numbers have been announced at CEDIA. So the JVC 4K projectors will be the DLA /NX5, NX7, NX9, also known as the RS1000, RS2000, and RS3000, since JVC has both a consumer and pro versions, even though they're exactly the same.
Yeah. Weird. Yeah. I don't know if they're still doing the pro versions. I forget whether they got the silver or the gold like trim around the lens.
Oh, that was like
the only visual difference. Yeah.
Well,
anyway, those are the model numbers now.
Yeah, they just do that so you can check up the prices for the custom install people. The Sony projectors will be the VPL /VW295ES.
29.5. That's an interesting way to say it, but 295 ES.
295 ES, 695 ES, and then 995 ES. I don't know. I just read it, man, and that's how it looked. There's too many letters before it for me to put it all together. 29. I got to VW 29. I went, oh, that's not an S, that's a 5. So then I said 5, and then I said ES.
Gotcha.
That's how that happened.
Anyway, that's them. So it's what is it? The 270, 370, and 870, I think, in Europe, and completely different model numbers in North America. But
will somebody tell Sony and the rest of the world that we are a global market now?
You know, they do the manufacturing in places to like depending on trade deals and stuff, and yeah. That's why
Sony's 4K. I already said that one. And Epson's strangely only had their Pro Cinema 4050 at the show to replace the 4040, but we can surely expect a 6050 and a 5050 as well. So
yeah,
5050
because they already did the T9400 over, or TW9400 over in Europe, which is the replacement for the TW9300, which was the 6040 UB.
Okay.
So 6050 UB and 5050 UB will be coming along. Even though, strangely, it didn't show much CEDIA.
Well, Emotiva was at CEDIA. They reiterated that the 16-channel 9.1.6 RMC1 processor will be available in November for $5,000, but they're Emotiva, so they couldn't just leave it at that.
Nope.
They announced, even though the RMC1 isn't even out yet, that they'll offer expansion modules for the RMC1 that will add 4 more speaker channels at a time for $700 per expansion module. You can add up to 3 modules for a maximum of 28 channels, supposedly, in the new year, which is it's a Mayan calendar, so it's actually 17 years from now.
Can they just bring the thing out before they start talking about expanding it? I mean, he was already talking about, you can replace the HDMI board so that when HDMI 2.1 arrives, it's like, well, look how long it took to get the HDMI board update for the XMC1. Like, that just came out earlier this year, and that was the precursor to supposedly letting the XMC1 get updated to 7.1.4, because right now it's a 7.1 processor, as it always has been. It's like, just actually release the RMC1 first, let some people buy it, and then maybe start talking about expanding modules. But nope, they can't leave it alone. They've got to talk about what's yet to come before the thing is even available to buy.
Well, they got to keep the hype train going, dude.
I guess so.
Stoke that hype engine, because the forums need something to talk about. They can't just talk about how they're about to get the thing. They got to talk about the thing that they haven't even ordered yet. But they're very excited to order. Where's the pre-order page? I want to give you my money now.
There is a coming soon for the RMC1 as itself now. That is on the Emotiva website.
Good.
Yeah.
That's not at all like actual thing, but whatever. Nathan let us know that Monoprice and ATI are expanding the Monolith amp series with a new 9 and 11 channel models. Use the same chassis as all the other Monolith amps because that's cheaper. 3 of the channels remain at 200 watts, while the other amp blades became going to become 2 by 100 watts to allow for the greater number of channels. So there was 9, and then they take what? I don't get it.
So there were 7.
Okay.
And then they keep 3 of them just as is, 200 watts per channel. Yeah. And then they have these like stereo blades that can go into either what it would be 3 or 4 of the slots that are now available, so that way you can get 9 or 11. Yeah. Right. Well, that's kind of cool. And yeah. Prices are listed.
$2,000 for the 9 channel, $2,500 for 11 channel, scheduled to be available at the end of September. So Monoprice a little bit better about actually putting the thing out that they say they're going to.
Well, Emo2 is good about their actual amplifiers coming out. So.
That is true. They actually do put those out occasionally. Yeah. Now, Nick, I guess I don't know how we got this, but anyways, Nick said I just saw this today too. IMAX Enhanced Certification Program was announced at CDL with Sony Sound United, Sony Pictures, and Paramount on board. It's 2 Sony.
Sound United is the parent company of Denon and Marantz, and also who else do they own now? Polk and a whole bunch of companies are under Sound United.
All right, IMAX and DTS partnered up to create it, and so it will use HDR10 and DTS-X. And while they're certifying both hardware and software, some existing hardware like the Sony A1E and A8F OLEDs, I swear to God, I am straight up going to start killing people about these stupid model numbers. They're impossible to say. A8F, A1E. A1E is not so bad. A8 is hard to say. The Marantz AV8805 processor will get IMAX enhanced certification and modes via firmware updates, and IMAX will be mastering the content themselves for a home release.
That's what they're saying.
What I was going to tell you right now: 10 dB bump in the bass. That's what you're looking at right here.
Yeah, well, and it's DTS as well, right? That's their sound partner. Yeah. Oh, they're going to be goosing some bass
between DTS and IMAX. It's going to be all the bass. Everybody's going to be like, "Oh yeah." Oh yeah,
the people complaining about the Disney releases, they're going to be like, please go IMAX enhanced.
IMAX enhanced.
But I mean, does this not remind you a heck of a lot of THX certification?
Well, yeah. I mean, yes, and THX certification is probably about as useful as this is going to be. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, from a disc standpoint, I always sought out THX discs.
Sure.
Over the other one. So this is certainly something I'm going to be looking for in the disc. I'm not going to give 2 craps about whether or not my receivers got it.
Some folks somehow worried
come out with, well, if they come out with some sort of like amazing up mixing mode that whatever, which we'll talk about in a second. I want to talk about up mixing in a second, but but yeah, I just don't see how the certification of the actual equipment is going to be all that impressive. But giving the mastering for sure.
Yeah. Some people were worried that, like, is this a whole new HDR format that's going to compete with the existing ones and all that? No, it's existing. This is just certifying. So they're remastering the stuff. DTS is remastering the audio. IMAX is remastering the video. They're going to put it out on discs. The IMAX enhanced hardware is simply so that there is a 1-button press, put this into IMAX enhanced mode, which is basically like, turn off all the crap that you shouldn't really have on anyway, but a lot of people do.
Right.
So it's like, there are TVs with a THX picture mode. There are lots of receivers with THX listening modes. That is essentially the same thing that's going on here. Those weren't like actually modes unto themselves. They weren't codecs. THX listening mode was still using Dolby codecs underneath it. It was just that this puts it into a mode where it does all the settings in the receiver or all the settings in your display for you with 1 button press. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine, because if you don't have it, it's not going to really hurt anything. So it's still going to work.
Yeah.
You can still watch THX.
Well, let's be honest.
THX DVDs on a non-THX system.
We will see what they actually do, because it could be 1 button press to screw everything up too.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's just
hey, look at REQ. Look at THX REQ.
That's true. Yeah, REQ. Yeah.
Okay, so we can't. Let's not just get on the hype train here, Rob. You and I, we got to be a little more pragmatic about this. And
well,
remember,
I also don't want to scare people away, though, that this is going to be something to worry about. I don't think it'll be that.
No, I don't. Especially from the disc standpoint, I think there's absolutely nothing to worry about. From the hardware standpoint, we're just going to take a look at it, and make sure that there's something going on.
And it is a mode, so you can always turn it off.
So in our comments, there's a comment for me and a comment for Rob. I'm going to go first.
Okay.
So I found that website, whatever it was, for that company in town. It's called Simply Speakers, and Simply Speakers is the company that does speaker repair. So if you have a driver that's screwed up or one driver that's broken your speaker, you can send them the driver or the whole speaker or whatever, and they will repair it for you. But never, it's just a local company. I thought, well, we don't have really somebody to recommend for speaker repair, and these guys, I mean. It's a real weird office, dude. I gotta be honest with you. I thought it's not. It kind of looks like it's an apartment complex, but it's I don't know if it is or not. But whatever, it just kind of is in the middle of this nothing, and then it looks like apartments all around it, and then where would be the office of the apartment complex is this speaker company.
All right.
Do
they service things from out of state, or
yeah, they do it from all over the place. So he's got an extensive website. In fact, he was like, people don't usually come in here. I'm like, well, you got to sign. So anyways, tell us your ridiculous story, Rob.
Yes. So I proclaimed on Twitter that I am ridiculous, and some people were like, "Well, what's that about?" I'm like, "Oh, no one will ever guess what I did last week, but when you hear it, you'll be like, yeah, that's Rob H." So how
many receivers did it take?
That's just it. See, and I was like, see, I've talked about that, so you might guess that. No. Okay, so I'll try not to spill all the beans, but I also don't want to hold everything back. So this is on the video side of things. I did something ridiculous on the video side of things, not on the audio side, as many people might have predicted. And so, as regular listeners, and Tom knows, I have a lovely LG OLED TV. It's fantastic. I like it very much. But there is one feature that it doesn't have. Can you guess what that is, Tom?
LG OLED, Dolby something, Dolby Vision.
Oh, it's got the Dolby Vision.
HDR10 plus.
Well, it doesn't have HDR10 plus, but I don't care about that. But it doesn't have 3D, Tom. Does not.
Did you get like 2 of them and put them right next to each other?
Not quite
with a separator that. Like from between the TVs directly to your eyes. That'd be amazing.
So as it turned out, last week I used some of my overtime that I banked up and took a couple of extra days off, and I was thinking about just doing some stuff around the house. But I got to looking online, and I always keep tabs on products that I'm interested in, and it just so happened that there was a fellow on eBay selling a 65-inch Sony Z9D. And so now that the Z9Fs are coming out, you're seeing Z9Ds kind of come onto the market. And so I could buy a brand new Sony Z9D television right here where I live, like from Best Buy or from Amazon, but they're currently priced at $4,500 Canadian, and there would be tax on top of that, and that's way more than I wanted to spend. Well, this guy was selling, it was a refurbished unit, and he was very, very upfront. He's like, there is one problem pixel. And he showed the pictures and everything like that. And I'm like, okay, you're not trying to pull any wool over anybody's eyes, but he was selling it for $1,100. So I'm like, $1,100 is significantly cheaper than $4,500. And that is within my price range. But the only thing was, he was not going to ship it anywhere because he didn't have the box for it or anything like that. And he didn't want to go through all that. And I didn't really want to go through all that either. And he was down in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, that's pretty far.
So I drove.
You could not drive.
From my place close to Vancouver, BC, down to Phoenix, Arizona, and back in 3 days to pick up a television.
How did you do that?
18 hours of driving a day.
Why would you do that? Why would you do that? That's insane.
To save like $3,000 on
you probably
a TV.
Spent $2,000 on gas and
no, I actually ended up staying at the same motel in Nevada because it was like right in the perfect spot to go from my place to Nevada, from Nevada to Phoenix, and then from Phoenix back to Nevada on the same day, and then from Nevada back to my place. So one motel that was very inexpensive, although very nice. So shout out to I forget their name, sorry, Sunset something in Nevada. About, I don't know.
Did you take it out of your car every time?
Oh, God, no.
You left it in the car?
Oh, yeah, I had it in my... It was one night that I was out of my car, and...
I took a 36-inch or 24-inch TV across, and I dragged it into the hotel room.
I was not dragging this 80+ pound television into that. It was one night for about 6 hours because that's about all amount of time I had to sleep and shower in order to get back within the allotted time. So yes, I consider that a ridiculous thing to have done, but it was fun. I had to actually kind of move my seat up because I have a Ford Edge, which has a pretty big trunk space, but this was still a large TV, and I had to move my seat up a little bit, so I was a little bit uncomfortable for about 23 hours worth of driving spread across 2 days on my way back. And the really fun part was talking to the border agent on the way down, because I left at this was why I couldn't record on Tuesday night, because I left at 11 from my place, got down to the border midnight, because I'm like, cool, that way my cell phone plan only goes across Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday instead of dinging me an extra day for traveling in the U.S. and roaming. So I got to the border at midnight, technically Wednesday, right? The midnight between Tuesday and Wednesday. And so the border agent's like, where are you going? I'm like, Phoenix. And he's like, what are you going down there for? I'm like, to pick up a TV. And he's looked at me for a few seconds. He's like, do you have any kind of thing to show what you're talking about? I'm like, yeah, here's the eBay listing. Here's my PayPal thing. He's like, why are you driving down to Arizona to get a TV? I'm like, because it saves me about $2,500 after the gas. And he's like, have a good time.
See you, weirdo.
But coming back into Canada was fine, because it always is, and very little tax that I had to pay, because you're allowed to bring in $800, and I was $300 over that, and all they charged me was the federal tax on top of that. So I don't know, 40 something bucks in tax, and there's my new TV. So I haven't spent a ton of time with it yet. I will say this. I'm sorry. In my opinion, OLEDs are better. They're just better. But as far as LCDs,
I've already forgotten what you got. What was it?
A Sony Z90. That was their flagship with the backlight master drive. Right. It actually came out in 2016, so that's why they're replacing it now. So the thing is, when you're head on to this Sony and it's showing its good stuff, and I do have to say, so I turned off all the Sony processing and everything, although I did have the local dimming on, of course. And I'm like, this doesn't look as good as I think it can. And they have one thing that they call their extended dynamic range. So I just put that on low, and I'm like, whoa, that, okay, maybe it isn't technically correct, but it undoubtedly just looks way more pleasing with that on low. So got to give Sony some props. Sometimes a little bit of picture processing is not the devil, because when it looks that much better. And there you go.
A couple of hours to the east, you could just pop by my house.
Phoenix is a little far from Florida. That would be another 24 hours of driving, dude.
I mean, yeah, but think of the face-to-face podcast we could have done.
So there you go, folks. If you do not think that is ridiculous, but if you also do not think, yeah, I can see Rob H doing exactly that. So I think I fulfilled
you have
my
an
Twitter promise.
Apartment. Where the heck do you keeping this thing? Are you keeping one TV in front of the other?
So I'm no, I'm gonna sell 3 TVs now, because I definitely don't need them. And I think I'm going to put the Sony in my theater, because when I'm going to watch 3D, I want to watch it in my theater. And this does do HDR really nicely. It does get shockingly bright, although I tamed that down a little bit. And I'm going to have the OLED in my living room. That's going to be my living room TV.
All right.
That's my story.
There we go. Let's get on to these questions, because this podcast is about other people, not just you, Rob. All right.
Oh, yes. I always go on so many tangents and talk about myself so much.
I know.
There are people who ask for more information about me, and that's the one question I ignore.
Iris on Facebook. What? Iris?
No.
This is Iris? I thought there was a different person that asked this question. All right. What exactly are phase and time domain when it comes to speaker? What would speakers with bad time domain performance sound like? All right, so phase is different than time domain, so it's not the same thing at all to begin with. But I mean, I guess it kind of is.
There's some relation there.
There's a relation there. So basically,
they both have to do with time,
right?
So there's that, yeah.
So okay, so when we talk about phase, we're talking about whether or not the drivers are going in and out at the same time, basically the same. So if you're talking about 2 subwoofers across the room from each other, if they're in phase with each other, then whenever the woofer goes out, on one, the woofer goes out on the other one. When the woofer goes in, the woofer goes in on the other one. Same thing with speakers. If you miswire them,
sure.
So you have your left speaker with the red going to the red, the black going to black, and the other speaker reversed, red going to black, black going to red for the speaker wire. Then when the drivers on one are going out, the drivers on the other one are going in. And back and forth.
That would be fully inverted phase or fully reversed polarity.
Right.
That'd be 180 degrees out of phase.
So your phase on having a speaker with bad phase, usually, first of all, and I've only ever heard of this with esoteric or
Yeah.
audiophile. No one talks about this in regular old speakers.
Some do, and it can be a thing in the crossover if you're not careful.
Well, right, but I
Cause
mean,
issues.
it's just not something that's this is the problem that's usually solved by esoteric companies that want you to buy their multi-$1,000 speakers that says we solved this problem that no one's talking about, but they should be talking about it.
I mean, the issue in a crossover would be that in a crossover, since it's not like, you know, this drive, your tweeter plays down to this frequency and then absolutely nothing below that, and your mid-range plays up to that frequency and then absolutely nothing above it. No, it's a crossover. So there are a certain number of frequencies where the tweeter and the mid-range, or the mid-range and the woofer, are both playing the same frequency at the same time. So if the drivers were out of phase with each other during those frequencies where they're both playing at the same time, that could cause a problem. So that's why they'll talk about having phase alignment in the crossover to make sure that these two drivers are supposed to be playing the exact same sound right now, so they better move in and out at the exact same time together. That is kind of important. That much makes sense.
That much does. So time domain, a lot of times this has to do with, you know, as the sound is coming off the front of the speaker, that it's all coming at this, you know, in this, the wave is all aligned together. A lot of times you see this with like Thiel. I think it's Thiel. Who does the swept-back speakers? Isn't it Thiel that does the swept-back speakers? All their speakers are like kind of reclined. They'll say it's for time domain reasons. And I'm like, what is it, Thiel or is it?
I don't know if it's. I mean, Magnapans are kind of leaning back a bit like that, but that's not who you were thinking of.
No, I'm thinking of.
I better not say because I'm not sure.
The explanation of those speakers is always like, oh, well, we do this to time align the drivers, and I mean I mean, I guess there is some probably mathematical reason why this is a thing that we should worry about a little bit, but sonically, I mean, the differences between the tweeter being like directly in line with the woofer behind it and it being slightly back, you know, I don't know if that's something you're going to hear. I don't know that you're going to be able to pick out that difference in something that's moving at 300 miles per second or whatever it is.
Now, you will hear the term time domain also applied to a couple of other areas. Yeah. One would be in ported speakers, or especially ported subwoofers. They'll talk about the time domain performance, specifically something that they'll call the group delay, which is... The group delay is an interesting thing. It's the signal said for the sound to come out this loud, but because the way a port works is via resonance, it actually takes a certain amount of time for the sound to basically bounce around inside of the speaker a couple of times, come out the port, and there's a little bit of delay in there. Not for the sound to it's not that the sound isn't there at all, it's just that it's not at the volume that was requested by the signal. There's some delay between the time the signal arrives at the speaker and the time the sound actually gets as loud as the signal wanted it to. And they call that the group delay, and that is a time domain issue. The other time where you hear time domain is to do with reflections in your room.
Right. And how long it takes for the sound in your room to dissipate.
Yep. Or how long it takes for the sound to go from the speaker directly to your ear versus from the speaker to a wall to your ear. There's a difference in time in those, and that is part of the time domain.
But the question has to do with speakers. Like if somebody says your speaker has bad phase or bad time domain, what does it mean? Usually means that they spent a lot more money on speakers than you did, and they want to make you feel bad about your speakers. That's usually what it means, and I'm being dead on.
There can be things to do with phase and time that are inherent to the speaker itself, though. There can be issues.
Can be, but you know, I mean, to say that a speaker universally, you know, like a line from a speaker manufacturer has bad time domain, I'd be like, I'm sorry, what?
Sorry. One example could be a really poorly implemented crossover. I mean, there are some speakers out there where literally there is one capacitor inside of that speaker, and that is it as far as crossover goes. And that can have...
There's a lot of tweeters out there and a lot of speakers that have nothing but a single capacitor or a resistor going on the wire from where the wire comes in from the crossover. It goes straight up to the tweeter with a resistor on it. That's it.
And that could result in inherently bad phase misalignment between the mid-range driver and the tweeter. That is possible.
That is possible.
The other thing where time domain could come in, there could be a group delay problem with the port if it is a ported speaker, or you could have it where there are lots of drivers out there where the signal said, hey, start playing, and takes them a little moment before they do, and especially on the other end, the signal said, hey, stop making sound, and it doesn't. But just due to inertia, it keeps on moving a while after the signal told it to stop. That is a time domain problem as well. We'll call that overhang usually, or poor transient response. So transient means a change, right? A difference between moving and not moving. That is the transition, the transient. So the transient response is how quickly does the speaker actually start or stop moving in response to the signal. And of course, the faster the better. That's more accurate to what the signal requested the speaker do. And some don't do that so well, so that would be poor time domain performance.
And some of this has to do with how much you spend on your speakers in general. I mean, so that there is some truth to that. So if you have a driver that's well made, that has a big magnet in it, you know, that has the ability to start and stop very easily.
Yeah, nice stiff drivers and a good voice coil.
Yeah, then yes, so, you know, this might be an example of a speaker that has, you know, some inherent issues, but it's hard for me to just to have somebody walk up to somebody else and say your speaker has time domain and phase issues. I'd be like, nah, you know, I think you're just a jerk. I'm gonna go with that.
I mean, if you play like a ping, you know, one little ding off a bell, and then that sound just keeps on going, even though the signal is supposed to be silent, that's a problem with your speaker. It's not supposed to be making sound, and yet it is.
Very well could be this problem with the room too. What you're hearing, it could just be reverberating around the room.
And it's rare that your speaker is actually more the problem than your room.
Yeah.
Most time domain issues are the room. Yeah.
So the way this question came up, if I remember correctly from the email, was like somebody had walked up to Iris here and said, "Your speaker has, you know, bad." And
known to have time domain issues or something.
Yeah, and I don't remember the speaker brand exactly, but I remember thinking, that dude's just being a hole. just ignoring him. I don't remember it being like a brand where I was like, oh yeah, well maybe, you know, if you came up to somebody and said, oh, your speaker has phase and time domain issues, you're like, well, where did the speakers come from? Oh, they made them themselves. All right then. You know, okay,
that could be
that could be a very valid thing to say. But you know, for a mass market brand to have known phase and time domain issues.
Well, I mean, the other thing you could say is that literally every speaker has some time domain inaccuracy, because there's no such thing as a speaker with no inertia whatsoever.
Right.
So there is no speaker out there that literally stops exactly when the signal says.
Even electrostatic speakers, which essentially the drivers have no mass.
It's close, but they do still, and they still aren't perfect. So yeah.
So yeah, you just look back at them and say, yes, it's yours, dude. And walk away.
But yeah, phase is about things moving at exactly the same time together. Time domain is about responding to the signal in some way that isn't exactly what the signal asked you to do.
And I mean, I know I'm making jokes about it, but the reality is this, and we see this all the time with cable manufacturers, especially esoteric cable manufacturers, where they manufacture a problem, and then they manufacture a cable that solves this problem. Right. And this is the same kind of issue here. You know, our speakers are much better phase aligned, and this is how we did it. Like, okay, fantastic, but do they? You know, how come your speakers cost tens of thousands of dollars, and these other speakers, which sound to my ears just as good, if not better than yours, cost a tenth of that? Oh well, your cables aren't good enough. Okay, well, let's just take this conversation elsewhere, okay? Because that's really what it is. And I feel like somebody who's really taken that drank that Kool-Aid of, you know, read all this pseudoscience about electricity and how it flows through cables and how this other stuff, and then they're like, oh, time domain issues and everything else is a real problem. They're actually just reading. They're not listening to speakers, because if they were listening to speakers, then right after somebody said, oh, can you hear how much better the phase is on this one, you would look at them and go, no.
Yeah, that phase is particularly difficult, because again, like we've been talking about the past couple of weeks, the waves still all just add together into one complex wave, and for you to actually hear
one driver is an inch behind the other driver, and that's what makes it better. And I don't quite understand that either, to be honest with you. I guess the idea is that the tweeter is further back because it moves faster. Therefore, the sound comes off of it just a fraction of a second earlier than it does off the woofer, which is bigger, but still smaller than the other woofer. So the other woofer is a little bit closer so that it takes longer to get going. It just seems very silly. The whole thing seems very
regardless,
silly.
You still have to account for it either way. So there's no reason you couldn't account for them all just being vertically aligned.
I know.
Also would work.
But you know, with the sexy laid back speaker, it just screams $50,000 a pair. Brandon, not Brandon. Brandon started off his email with some very kind words saying our podcast has helped to create some great family memories. So thanks, Brandon, for the encouragement. Thank you.
We don't often toot our own horn, but Brandon's message was very nice, so I wanted to at least thank him for it.
All right. Thank you, Brandon. He also noted that when he donated to PayPal last week, it took him a while since he was looking at the mobile version of our website, and it appears as though the donation link only shows up the desktop version. So just heads up to everyone on that. Yeah, and then while Rob was telling his story, I fixed the Patreon thing, so that's done.
Well, there you go. My story was beneficial on all kinds of fronts.
Brandon and his wife have 4 kids, and they've recently moved to a larger house with 2,900 cubic foot rec room that serves as their theater area for movies, TV, and video games. His old Harman Kardon home and theater in the box wasn't cutting it, so he checked the AVS forums and got pointed towards the Synacoustic speakers and Rhythmic subs. He started with a pair of used Rhythmic E15 HP subs. HP is the high-powered model, and E is probably, I don't know, is it?
Yeah, well, they have the F15 HP, and the E15 HP is the exact same driver and amp, but in a slightly smaller sealed cabinet.
Okay, that's what I thought. And he was so impressed that he immediately sought after a used pair of Ascend Sierra 1 speakers. His wife liked the Ascend speakers so much they decided to get speakers for their living room kitchen area upstairs. The upstairs areas need to be physically smaller, so they ended up with Sierra Lunas, plus the Rhythmic F12 sealed sub. That setup was so impressive that now Brandon has purchased 3 Sierra Horizon RAW speakers for the rec room. 2 of them have the tweeters rotated 90 degrees so that they can be positioned vertically as front, left, and right speakers. But when they were delivered, he was shocked at their size. So, are they too large for his 2,900 cubic foot room? Should he consider selling Horizons and getting the Sierra 2s instead? Okay, first of all, how many times do we get people asking us if their speakers are too large? Never. Just the answer is never.
On this podcast, it is kind of rare.
That. They're always like, I'm gonna get towers for my 1,200.
That's very true. Yeah, we're often the ones saying go smaller than what the person writing had in mind. But for anyone looking on YouTube, there is an image right now, and to my eye, those speakers don't look physically too large at all. That's just
they look fine.
eyeing them.
Yeah, that's just eyeing them. Okay, so first of all,
also in terms of output, right?
Too large of a speaker is very rarely a thing that to worry about as far as
the sound
itself and how it sounds. It's more about whether or not you can position them the way that you want to. So, but these are not that big. So these are big speakers. I mean, for a bookshelf speaker, the Horizons are huge. They are
Compared to a bookshelf speaker, they're huge. Yeah.
So could you have similar sound or similarly good sound in your room with a smaller speaker? The answer is probably yes. You probably could have gone with the Sierra 2s and it would have been just fine. But you've got them, so I just stick with them. They're already there, and they look good, and they're fine.
These are not an inappropriate size for your room at all. Not at all. No. I mean, 2,900 cubic feet, we're sort of right on the border between a medium and a large-sized room.
Right.
You could, I think he said, what is the room, about 20 feet long, I believe is what we end up with. About 20 feet long. So, there's certainly you're sitting more than 10 feet away, 12 feet away probably, perhaps even 15 feet away or so. The Horizon RAW speakers, if you have enough amplifier power to drive them, they can reach full reference volume, which is 105 decibel peaks and 85 decibels average. They can do that very comfortably at a distance of about 15 feet. Right around 18 feet or so is sort of their limit of reaching that full reference volume, although not most of us don't actually really want to hit that. Once you start getting to distances of 20 feet or more, you actually want even higher output speakers. So given your room size and that you very well might be 12 to 15 feet away from the front of the room, it's an entirely appropriate choice.
Yeah. So he's got them on folding chairs. That's his
Yeah,
stance
for the moment.
right
Yeah, I
now,
mean,
which
they've
is
just
fine.
moved in, so
Yeah.
the
It's
room
fine.
itself isn't
It's
even
just very
fully
cute.
finished
I
yet.
was like, you know what? It's like they're guests in your house. And he's got a center. He's got the same speaker, but on its side for the center channel below
That's
the
right.
TV. And he's got the two vertically on either side of the TV. He's got a plush couch in front of it, and then another plush couch behind that couch.
Yeah.
Not on a riser, though. It looks like I would imagine he's probably going to have it on a riser someday.
It could be, yeah. As we say, this room is not fully finished yet, but yeah, I mean, things are looking good to me.
I don't see any problem with the speakers in this room.
No, none whatsoever.
He asks, are there any problems associated with having the tweeters rotated so the two of them stand vertically? And the answer to that, of course, is no, because you can do that.
And in fact, this is a very good thing. Like with the Raoul Ribbon tweeters, if there's one, I don't know, quirk, flaw even that you might want to say, is that vertically they have very narrow dispersion.
Right.
So if you stand up or lie down on the floor, the timbre of the sound will change versus moving side to side. So if you had 3 of these where they were all meant to be placed horizontally, like your center is,
and you just stood them up, then your your horizontal dispersion would, and then you would get they'd be like laser beams. So
it's a good thing. I mean, as long as what you want is for them to be standing up the way they are, it's a very good thing that the tweeters are rotated.
Well, okay, so other tweeters, you don't have to do the rotation thing in order to have them sound the same. These you do. The fact that the speaker manufacturer says that you can do it is really the only answer you really need. Because if the speaker manufacturer says no, I can't do that, then you can't do it. But in this case, you can. And there's a lot of other. I think my tweeter is the same way in this. In the various grands, the waveguide is a specific shape.
Sure.
So if you rotate the speaker from one to vertically to horizontally, you have to rotate the tweeter, or the waveguide is in the wrong position.
Again, the dispersion is going to be weird. It's now the sound is going to be going very tall but not very wide, right? Which isn't usually what you want.
Right. So Brandon heard that Rob has custom-made Sierra Horizon speakers. What are the pros and cons of the regular Horizons versus custom-made ones? My answer to that is there better be no pros or cons, because that's the whole point. The whole point is that he wanted those speakers, but he could not fit them in the space. He paid for custom so that he could get the same sound that he liked out of the speakers, but in a different shaped box. So that's supposed to be the answer.
Yeah. The pro is that it's the exact dimensions that I needed to fit the space I had available. That's a big pro.
The con is it costs more money.
The con is it costs more money to get them custom, because especially the center that I got is a one-off. The left and right versions that I got, Dave Fabricant, who runs Ascend Acoustics, he had at least made that cabinet before, so he didn't have to draw up new plans or talk to the bamboo cutter or whatever. Like they're like, no, we've already made that shape and size before, so that was okay. But the center that I got, what I needed was one with very shallow depth, as little depth from front to back as possible. It almost ended up being the same size as the tower, as though you just took the tower and like laid it on its back.
Oh my!
But it's even narrower than from the tower from left to right. The left to right would become the front to back of my center, and it's even narrower than that. I wanted it as narrow from front to back as possible. So that's what I got.
So it's long and thin.
It's very wide. Yeah. It's like about as tall as the regular Horizon, which does have the tweeter above a mid-range driver, so it's a fairly tall, about a foot tall. But then it's only 7 inches deep from front to back. Nice. And these are big drivers that are in this speaker. So it costs more. That's the downside, but it fit where I needed to fit. So that's a big plus, because if I bought the regular one, I couldn't have used it. It wouldn't have fit. That would be a big minus.
So would he be better off selling his current left-right pair and ordering custom cabinet versions? Would they image better or create a better soundstage? And again, they better not, because that's the whole point. So no. You're fine.
As long as you're able to position the ones that you've got where you want your front, left, and rights to be, no reason to sell them.
He says they're actually thinking that in a few years they might renovate this house with an addition, at what point the rec room might be even larger, approximately 24 by 20, making it closer to 3,900 cubic feet. Would that still be the appropriate room size for the Horizons as fronts? Well, that depends not on the size of your room, but where you're sitting in relation to the speaker. So like Rob said, if you're within 15 to 18 feet, then you can hit full reference volume. And honestly, you might have to buy an amp, but other than that, even if you're sitting 20 feet away from these things, which I don't think you would be in a 20
by 24, that's starting to get very close to one of those walls.
You're probably not listening at full reference volume anyway, so you may be turning it up to full reference volume. It won't be hitting full reference at your seat if you were 20 feet away, but that's okay.
It'll still be close. And I mean, you got 4 young kids. How often are you actually going to be blasting 105 decibels? Pretty rare.
Every time I watch a Disney movie. All right. On the video side, they currently sit 9 feet away from a 75-inch TV, which works out to be a 33.5 degree field of view. He was thinking he'd like to get a JVC projector and a 120-inch screen. He'd want to sit 11 feet away from the screen. Does that sound reasonable? 11 feet from a 120-inch screen. I mean, it sounds pretty big, dude. I gotta be honest with you. It's gonna be bigger than what he's used to, for sure.
Yes, but that is a 43.5 degree field of view. Which
you would notice the difference, that's for sure.
But oh yeah, but that's kind of the point. Going projector, I'd be very happy with that. I like a 42 to 45 degree field of view. That's where I personally always land. Now, some people like the image larger than that. Some people like it smaller than that. And there's no right or wrong to it. But if you're like, I'm going to end up with a 43 degree field of view, I'm like, that's right in what I would like. So there's no reason to say that sounds unreasonable.
I agree. So are the dual rhythmic E15 HP subwoofers appropriate for his room size? Well, I mean, you should already know the answer to this question, because if you calibrated your subs and you can hit 75 dB and your volume knob's not completely maxed out and you're goosing it up and it's making a bunch of farting noises, then you are fine. It wouldn't make farting noises. It's a sealed sub. But anyways, clanking noises would be it. I would think that the E15 HP subs would be fine in this room, especially duals.
Yeah, so definitely in the current room size that you have of 2,900 cubic feet, they would be absolutely fine. These have a little bit more output than, say, SB2000s from SVS. They'd be like a hair shy of the now gone SB12 Plus models.
Right.
They're right in that sort of ballpark. So even when you go up to the 3,900 cubic feet, again, they might struggle to hit full reference volume. You're asking your LFE channel to produce 115 decibels theoretically, but again, how often do you actually want to do that? No, the short answer is they're fine. I would see no reason to worry about them in this room size at all.
No, I wouldn't either. When you get to the bigger room size, I would definitely, in my mind, I'd be like,
possible.
Go ahead and upgrade the subwoofers as well. Upgrade the room, you gotta upgrade the subs. So I would be okay with that. So are we in agreement with the subwoofer placement? One in the front left corner, one in the rear right corner. So if you look at his room, is fairly rectangular.
Yes.
Okay. But there is an opening, a kind of a large opening to the back, if you want to call it an opening.
Yes.
It has its desks back there. There's stairs that go up to, I guess, or out, down, or whatever. They go someplace to a living room. Where there's a door at the top of the stairs, but there's a closet on the left side and a bathroom on the right. So when he says his front left corner, I'm going to sneeze. But his front left corner, there's a sub there. When he says his rear right corner, it's actually not the rear of the entire space, because there's this kind of empty kind of void between where the bathroom and the closet is. That being said, I think it's a pretty good placement. I mean, you could, in theory, once you got your screen, you could put a sub in the front and a sub at the back of the room, right by the stairs, sort of
like where the desk is right
now.
Where
the desk is, and then
possibly
that would be, perfectly symmetrical. But the room isn't perfectly symmetrical, so I think this is just fine.
Yeah, I mean, this is a placement that I would certainly try myself.
Yeah.
I mean, if I got really bad results, of course, I'd be looking to move it, but that looks quite reasonable to me.
Yeah. So the right side wall has a window at the first reflection point and a sliding glass door closer to the back of the room. Would heavy blackout curtains be sufficient for when he installs his projector setup? And would those same curtains be sufficient as acoustic absorption for the first reflection points on the side walls? Yes and no. So the first one is, will blackout curtains black out the light? Generally, yes. Like in my home theater, the blackout curtains do a really good job of, God, the sneeze is just like right there. It's killing me.
Every podcast.
No, it's not. The last 2 podcasts, I did not sneeze. This one I'm going to, and it's coming. And when it does, it's going to sneak up. It's killing me. It's right. It's like ants in my nose. All right. So the blackout curtains, I mean, it depends on which ones you get, I suppose. But the
Mm.
ones I got, there's still some light that's let in, so it will not be 100% completely blacked out, depending on the curtains. If you go, my curtains were cheap as chips, man. I bought the cheapest ones I could find, and they've worked great for me. I mean, during daytime, there is a little bit of light that comes in. I'm like, I'll fiddle with it or whatever. I could actually like tape it down around the window if I was going to.
Yeah, I mean, often there's like just a little bit of light leaking around the edges of the curtain. It's not like the curtain is sealed to your window frame.
Acoustically, they're pretty much useless. I mean, they're not really doing much of anything. So you're going to want to have some sort of acoustic panel at that first reflection point if you can. Now, if it can't be permanent, that's fine. Just tuck it in the corner someplace and then wheel it out. Or
I mean, you can actually put the panel behind the curtain.
Yeah, well, I mean,
still does
I imagine he doesn't want the. I mean, there's a door, so he doesn't want the panel in front of the door.
Well, not the sliding glass door, but the other one is a window, as far as I can tell. Like,
you still don't want it in front of a window either. I hate to break it to you. You don't want to be looking in the back of a panel.
I guess maybe that's true.
You just want to wheel this thing, out whenever you're watching something. It's not that hard. So
I mean, a very thick drape is better than absolutely nothing but it's only going to be the very highest frequencies that it's going to do anything to. And usually we're trying to curtail sort of like the vocal range, because that's where we don't want that early reflection that smears the vocal range, the direct sound versus that reflected sound. And it drapes, even really heavy drapes, only the highest frequencies are really being affected by that. So yeah, ideally you'd still have a panel there, but curtain, big heavy drape, better than absolutely nothing.
Right. They haven't completed the rec room yet, so what's there now is all just temporary setup. The ceiling still needs to be finished, and other parts of the room can be changed if necessary. Do we think any sort of construction or renovation is needed, and how would we recommend finishing the room? So you guys can't see these pictures unless you're on YouTube, so it's a little hard to see, but I mean, part of the ceiling is open in the back.
Yeah, that's right.
So this is a perfect opportunity for you to start thinking about whether or not you're going to want overhead speakers. Now, I don't know how many times I have to say this, but I am not a big advocate of Atmos, but you're going to keep hearing it on this podcast, and eventually someday you're going to be like, I wonder if I should get Atmos. They always talk about it. Well, if you're going to wire for it now.
Yeah. Because the wire isn't very expensive. So even if you're not doing the speakers now, just at least have the wires up there in the ceiling, and then it's easy peasy.
And figure out where you're going to run your projector to, and then run some conduit up there to. Yeah. And I'm going to guess it's going to be this closet where you could end up putting all this gear.
Oh,
so there's a closet back there. So, start thinking about running conduit to that, and just, throw some wires around so that you can get some wires to where you need them to be for all of this stuff, so that you can, because you're not going to want to have all your gear up front with that big old 120-inch screen.
Yeah.
You're going to want to have it someplace else. So figure out wherever that place is going to be and then put it there.
Yeah. So, I mean, the only other question is, do you want to do soundproofing in here? Maybe it's necessary, maybe it isn't. But obviously, if that's, if there was...
Doesn't sound like he's got speakers in every freaking room anyway. So he's got subwoofers in the living room. He's got them all over the place.
It's true. Yeah. So, yeah. So, I mean, that would be the only other thing. And that's not you have to do it. It's just, if you were going to, obviously, whenever you're going to finish the room would be the time to do that. But I mean, it could be as simple as... just 2 layers of drywall, maybe with some green glue in between. You don't have to go whole hog to still have an improvement, but if you are going to go whole hog, then obviously the time to do it is whenever you're going to finish the room anyway. I think that's about it.
All right, you take the next question. I gotta go blow my nose.
All right, sounds good. So, Robert G was our next question, and Robert has his music collection stored as 24-bit FLAC files. So, FLAC is the free lossless audio codec. He was using his Denon X4300H receiver's USB port to play those files, but it has been freezing up lately. So, he decided to try using his Oppo 203's USB port. So he's got his files stored on a USB drive, 24-bit FLAC files, was plugging them straight into his Denon via USB. Now he's plugging them into his Oppo player, and then the Oppo is outputting the audio via HDMI to his Denon. But not sure why your Denon was freezing up. I don't know if that's something you could have fixed under warranty. Shouldn't be doing that, especially if it wasn't before. So that's somewhat of a concern. But his question was more on the Oppo. When he started using the Oppo player there, he noticed a large difference in the sound. He had bright treble, he had really lacking bass, and he didn't change any processing or sound or listening modes in his receiver. And he believes that the way he had his Oppo set up was just for bitstream output via HDMI. So with the sound being so different, he's wondering why that's the case, especially when he didn't change anything in his receiver. And if he attempts to apply upmixing in his receiver, like Dolby Surround upmixing or DTS Neural X upmixing, he gets bad static. So he sent in some images of these are the settings in his Oppo player.
Right.
Now, the major one, so I quickly ran through my Oppo player, and I think the main thing that you need to be aware of is FLAC files are not going to be output as a bitstream. That's not a format that's going to be bitstream from the player to the receiver. Bitstream is only going to be for Dolby formats or DTS formats. That's all that's ever going to be bitstreamed. So FLAC files being played by the Oppo, those are going to be decoded inside of the Oppo. And when the audio is decoded inside of the Oppo, it defaults to using whatever you have set up in the speaker configuration menu. So looking at the menu that he sent in to us, there is the speaker configuration. Now, he didn't click into that and take pictures of that.
But you can see the crossover, and that's what
the crossover has been set. That's right.
That's what that was my big thing when I saw this. I saw that crossover and went, I don't think so.
So, I mean, that would explain the lack of bass.
Right.
If a crossover has been set for everything that's being output. On top of that, if you followed proper setup in your Denon, now your Denon also is applying a crossover, which means you have cascading crossovers, which starts to explain why you have really lacking bass. Your treble would sound very bright, just from the lack of bass, essentially. And it could explain some of the static going on, because so by default, I believe the Oppo is set to output 7.1 PCM. So if you're now trying to apply an upmixer to that, it's essentially trying to upmix two stereo channels embedded within a 7.1 signal. So the other channels are ostensibly silent, but they're not always truly silent.
Right.
There can be little crackles and stuff in those channels, so that could explain the static. So I believe this is really coming down to the Oppo. You need to go into that speaker configuration. What you really want to do is set it to only output stereo, which is one of the options, because that's all you're outputting from your 24-bit FLAC files. And you want to set the front, left, and right speakers in the Oppo's setup to large. You want to set them to full range with no crossover, because then the full signal in two-channel stereo is just being sent to your Denon now as PCM. It's just being sent as two-channel PCM full range. And now your Denon gets to do whatever it's going to do to the signal as it should.
And that's a little non-intuitive too. I've run into this. I've run into this problem before where we talk about how to set up your speakers, how to, what your speakers should always be set to small and stuff like that. And you get into your source and you're like, okay, so I got to make sure I set my speakers to small, set it crossover to 80 hertz, blah, blah, blah. That's what Tom and Rob are always saying. I got to make sure I do that. And you're like, yeah, that's what we said. And we do say it a lot, but
only for your AV receiver.
Everything else should be coming out. And when we say bitstream, that just bypasses all that stuff that's in there and lets the receiver do the decoding. But when the receiver can't, you need to have your player set up to send out the signal the way it is on the disc. And the disc is two channels, full range.
That's right.
That's all it is. And there is no crossing over or anything else in there. So that's what it should be sending out. And I know it's not intuitive sometimes and everything else, but that's the way.
But I'm pretty sure that's the issue at fault here.
Yeah. All right. Just Jay. Jay had what? Why do we call him Just Jay?
That's how he identifies himself.
All right. I think I made that up. I don't remember why. Jay has a Marantz AV7702 Mark II processor with an Emotiva Bass A5 170 amp, 5175, whatever. 5
by 175.
Yeah. And a Bass A700 amp. He has some 3-foot RCA cables and some 6-foot RCA cables connected to his Marantz processor to all of those amp channels, but he's getting a hum. It's clearly audible coming out of his speakers from 3 feet away. He discovered that if he only uses his 3-foot cables or only uses his 6-foot cables, the hum almost goes away completely. But as soon as he has a mix of 3 and 6-foot cables, the hum returns. What is happening? Different lengths of RCA cables aren't supposed to make a difference like this, right? Yeah, you got a bad cable? It's really weird. It's a very strange thing that's going on here, and I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, this does sound
like it really sounds like a bad connector. Like there's something, at the end of the cable that's not whatever, and it feels to. I mean, it sounds to me like there's a little bit of a short going on. But why would only the 3-foot cables have the problem, or only when you mix them would it be the issue?
Yeah, I mean, it does. So it's not the length. That's not the culprit.
No.
I don't know if all of your 3-foot cables are the same as each other, and all of your 6-foot cables are the same as each other, but the 3 and the 6-foot are different. They're like different batches, maybe bought them at different times. Because a hum pretty much electrically happens because there's some difference in potential somewhere. One set of cables has slightly more resistance than the other. One set of cables has a slightly different ground level than the other. And since a lot of RCA cables are not properly built, and they actually only attach the shield on one end, and then call it a unidirectional cable, as though you actually have to have it like going in one direction only. Like you'll see some RCA cables that actually have source and sink on the two ends identified, and they're like, this is the direction that the signal must go. Well, that's not how an RCA cable is supposed to be built, but a lot of them are.
Right.
And they do that to try and eliminate ground loops by simply not having one of the devices connected to ground on the other end. That ain't right. So
it does fix the loop problem, though. You can't loop if there's no pathway.
So this doesn't have to even be an inexpensive cable. It's often very expensive cables that are built that way, because esoteric cables do some stupid stuff. So honestly, I this very well could be a cable problem, but it's not like because of the length.
Right.
It's not because a properly built RCA cable would do this, but it could be because of an improperly built RCA cable. And if all of them were improperly built, then you won't get this issue. But if some of them were improperly built and some of them weren't, then you will have a difference in ground potential between those two wires, and you'll get a hum. Right. So that could very well be the case.
All new cables?
I guess so.
Jeff would like to upgrade the 42-inch TV in his bedroom. This TV does not get a ton of use. It's pretty much just light entertainment late at night. He's easily got the space for a 65-inch screen. He'd also like to get a sound bar to go with the TV. Total budget is $2,000. And ideally, he'd like the sound bar if it could work with AirPlay. Okay, AirPlay. Mm-hmm. So what do we recommend? Well, for TVs, after going to Target recently and looking at those TCLs, I was like, holy crap, these things are like, I mean, when I was in college, I think I bought a Toshiba TV that cost about as much as a 55-inch flat screen TV does today. And I was poor. I was so poor. I was like, $350 was like a ton of money for me. And here we are, like $350, and you're getting like a huge TCL. So I gotta go TCL, man.
Yeah, and in fact, I mean, you can get their current North American flagship for well under $940, I think, right now at Best Buy. That's the 65-inch.
People need to grab these things before this company goes under. They're not making any money. You gotta understand. They're making nothing. Some government's going to figure out that they're like, it's all child labor or something, and it's awful, and they should be shut down. But between now and then, buy as many TVs as you can. Because these prices are insane.
Yeah, it's the TCL 65R615. So that's their 600 series, their 6 series. That's the current model. Does Dolby Vision, does HDR10, has Roku built in. Bar none, it's a very nice TV, and it's, I think $940 at Best Buy right now. Pretty tough to beat that, especially when you're like, this TV isn't even super important to me, but I'm like, why why not get that? You might end up deciding to put this in your theater and move whatever's in your theater to your bedroom. It could be that nice. So yeah, there's no reason to not do that. And then as far as sound bars that do AirPlay, Yamaha has sound bars that do AirPlay, and they make really nice sound bars. In fact, they have a new one that came out recently. It's their MusicCast 400, or what is it? It's got a something 400 in the name there. So we're going to bring it up here. We'll look at Bar 400. There you are, Bar,
of course.
all capitalized. But it's the new Music Bar 400. It actually has DTS Virtual X if you want to apply that. That's the thing that tries to make it sound like stuff is coming from above you, even though it isn't really. But yeah, I mean, really good reviews on this thing. It does go for $500, but we just got you a TV for under $1,000. You said your budget was $2,000. So why not spend a little bit more on a really nice Yamaha soundbar that does have AirPlay, also has Yamaha's MusicCast system and all that. This actually has like 2 woofers and a tweeter for each of the channels, so it's actually got a pretty good driver complement in it. Nice wireless sub that comes with it as well. So I'm pointing you at that.
I'm gonna put the sub in quotation marks. Yeah, that's fine. It's a sound bar. It's not like one of those. It's not trying to do the virtual surround, right?
Well, like I say, the DTS Virtual X is an option if you want to use that listening mode. But one other thing the Bar 400 can do is Yamaha does have other like individual wireless speakers, and it does allow you to get a pair of those and use them as actual surrounds if you want to in the future. So lots you can do with that.
Jonathan has enjoyed his 70-inch Vizio M Series TV, but since he got it in 2015, it doesn't do HDR, although it has 4K resolution. He's been using a 1080p Blu-ray player and his NVIDIA Shield for all of his streaming services, but he does have an Atmos speaker setup, so Ultra HD Blu-ray is enticing. His wife really doesn't think they need any sort of upgrade, but a fairly small expenditure wouldn't cause too much disapproval. A big expenditure would not go over well, though. So what do we think is his best move? A, do absolutely nothing. Just don't worry about Ultra HD Blu-rays at all. B, get the cheapest possible Ultra HD Blu-ray player and just hope that HDR to SDR conversion will look okay. C, spend upwards of $500 on the Panasonic UB820 for supposedly better HDR to SDR conversion and Dolby Vision capability. And that $500 we're now getting into disapproval territory if wondering where that cutoff line was, somewhere south of $500. Upgrade the TV to an HDR model and apparently get a new wife. Now it's a big purchase that they'd have to talk about and decide on together. But if HDR is super duper worth it, maybe it's worth having a discussion. Or something else. So what do I think? I think so he can't do HDR and the other garbage.
He can't do HDR. He can do 4K, but not HDR, not Dolby Vision.
But he wants the Atmos.
He'd like to have the Atmos, so Ultra HD Blu-rays, of course. I mean, that would also get him the 4K resolution.
Well, I mean, that's what I did. I did the Sony UDP X700 or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, you got the X700. I mean, I kind of maybe point you to the X800. By all accounts, it's a nicer player.
Why did you send me to the X700? You said everybody else 800.
For the least expensive one.
He's such a jerk, guys. You know what, guys? He did this because he wanted to. He didn't know anybody who had a 700, and he's like,
also true.
One. I wanted to get a review of it, and there it is. Yeah. Speaking of,
and now we're like, maybe get the X800 instead.
You're a jerk, man.
But the X800.
All they say Canadians are so nice. Look at how conniving they are.
That's
little
right.
Backstabbers. Yeah, I would get the cheaper Blu-ray player and live with that. I think that would be fine. You're not going to get any more benefit out of it. And then later on, when you upgrade your TV at some later date, this Ultra HD Blu-ray player will either be good enough for you at that point, or it won't be, and you'll only be at a couple $100 instead of a couple of thousand.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm saying the X800 is because it has very nice HDR to SDR conversion. And not all Ultra HD Blu-ray players do. So you are looking at $300 like on Amazon right now. So it's not super duper cheap, but it's still like that's definitely less than $500. It's everything you need. Even if you upgrade your TV, it's still going to be so. It doesn't do Dolby Vision. That's the X800 doesn't do Dolby Vision. The X700 does, but the X700 has significantly lower build quality, and they haven't found the HDR to SDR conversion to be quite as like it doesn't give you as many options as the X800 does, seemingly anyway. So we were hoping it would, but apparently it doesn't. So yeah, I'm going back to the X800. $300. It's kind of splitting the difference between all of these, I think, isn't it? You know, it's not the 500, but it's not the cheapest Ultra HD Blu-ray player either. But it's nice build quality. Does the HDR to SDR conversion? Certainly not a new TV.
I think it gets you the Atmos that you want.
It does, definitely.
The 4K that you can actually see, and then everything else you've got your NVIDIA Shield and all that.
Yeah.
I did watch the new Jack Ryan.
Oh, okay, on Amazon.
On Amazon, I watched 2 episodes of it.
Yep.
I also watched 2 episodes of Iron Fist the other night too, because Iron Fist season 2 came out.
It did.
Which apparently is supposed to be better than Iron Fist season 1. And
saying.
so far, it is better. Though the bar was set awfully low. I still haven't finished Power Man, Luke Cage yet. So whatever. But I did watch Jack Ryan on Amazon Prime on my Xbox rather than on the X700. Still had lip sync issues. So Amazon could suck it.
That'd be Amazon. Yep.
Jonathan says on a completely different topic, he shared a long article entitled Filtering Films and an empirical study on what consumers would mute and excise from Hollywood fare if only they could.
What a title.
I know, right? Rolls off the tongue. This details consumer reaction to cleaned up versions of Hollywood movies. A lot of this stems from airlines where language, nudity, and sex scenes, although almost never violence, are removed or altered. But the airlines make those decisions, even though they might charge full price for a rental during flight. The article looks into what consumers do when they are given a choice, and their data shows a preference for removing at least a portion of sex scenes and bad language, but not violence, with viewers still ranking the censored versions highly, even when they had to pay just as much as the original unaltered version. Jonathan finds the whole topic fascinating and wonders how we feel about this intersection of artistic intent, commerce, and consumer choice. What are our thoughts? Well, I have many thoughts on this. We're not going to go into all of them because we're only in question 6, and I thought we would be done early tonight. Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. Mostly because of Rob's unusually long story. It's just so selfish. So, so artistic intent and what the consumer wants. Example here is my parents. My parents stopped Netflix subscription because they couldn't find anything that fit in, and this is not what they said, but how I'm interpreting it for you, fit into their worldview.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was just too many, because my parents are highly religious, too many people who were homosexual, too many relationships that were, too much drinking, too much cursing, too much nudity, too much, all of this stuff, all these things they don't want to see. Now, it is their right to not want to see those things. Sure. And I don't think anyone should have to force them to see that. But I think it's the artist's responsibility to challenge society. That is part of what it means to be an artist. And while we don't purport to be artists on this, we are, content creators. And our job here is to challenge thinking within our little niche. Right? Our niche is home theater and AV, and people come to us with ideas on how things should be, and our job is to challenge them to think differently about it. And sometimes we do that by saying your subwoofer's in the wrong place, and that's why it sounds bad. And they're like, no, it's not. That's what they said on the website. And I'm like, okay, well, why don't you move it anyways? And they do, and it sounds better. And then they've been challenged and they've been better for it. Some people, and this has happened on this podcast, have listened to our suggestions, bought speakers we've suggested, and not liked them. Mm-hmm. That has happened. They bought Rob's speakers, which I know are good speakers, and they didn't like them. Now, we had all kinds of reasons why they didn't like them that had nothing to do with the speakers, but we challenged their thinking, and it was not borne out. Allowing people to choose, what they see and what they don't see within the context of a movie that has been made, I feel like is detrimental to the artist's intent. And if you don't want to see those things, that's fine. But I don't think that you can, that you should excise them from the movie. You want to fast forward past them, you want to walk out of the room while it's happening, that's fine. But I think that having the consumer have the ability to say, okay, I'm going to pick and choose just the scenes I like out of this movie, and that's going to be it. I don't think that's something that we need.
Hmm. Yeah, I did not read this entire article because it's very long, and I did not. I mean, not because I don't want to. It's just I literally didn't have time to this week because I did a lot of driving. But
If you had Tesla, you could have read while you were
right,
driving,
right, yeah,
and then rammed
autopilot.
into the back of a semi at 75 miles an hour.
Could
So,
have been much worse. But yeah, early on they were talking about how at one point Sony Pictures was proposing to release two versions of movies for sale on DVD,
right.
and that they were going to have the regular theatrical version unaltered, and then they were going to have a cleaned up version. And of course, yeah, people might remember there used to be the blockbuster version, which was a cleaned up version. And like they say, this still happens on airlines. It certainly still happens for the network television broadcast.
Sure.
Right? They'll bleep out words or.
And when I'm watching Hulu, and if I click on the movie and they said that this movie has been edited for content because it happens to be on been streaming from a TV channel rather than something else, I'm like, nope, I'm out.
Right. So it's not like these censored versions don't exist or whatever.
Right.
But when Sony was proposing to do this on DVD, quite a few directors who work for them were like, no, like we're literally not going to work for you anymore if you do this. Like we already begrudgingly accept that there is the blockbuster version and the airline version and the TV edit. But those things all come out well after the theatrical release. They come out after the DVD window. And it's like, okay, they begrudgingly accept that, but they're not going to accept having a version that they were not in charge of, where some producer or executive decided, okay, we're going to remove all this language and nudity or violence or whatever it is that they're going to remove, and the director didn't have any say in that, and they're like, no, we're not going to do that, and Sony backed off. But interestingly, this study was like, well, when consumers are given to the choice, a lot of them choose the cleaned up version and they're happy to do so. They'd actually prefer the TV edit or what used to be the blockbuster version. I mean, there was a reason Blockbuster did it at one point. And I will say sometimes, depending on if I'm watching by myself, I want the unaltered version. That's what I want. But there are occasions where I'm watching with other people, like, it would be kind of nice if this were a PG or a PG-13 instead of a hard R, sometimes it's not the most comfortable thing,
Right.
But at the same time, it's like, well, let's just not watch that particular movie then. It's not like there aren't PG and PG-13 movies to choose from.
Sure. And, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get too into my own head about this whole thing. So let's not begrudge it, but there's something to be said for that whole experience of watching something and then watching it much, much later.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at all those John Hughes movies that we are so beloved, right? You look back on them through the lens of current events, and you're like, this is the rapiest movie I've seen in quite some time. Thank you, John Hughes, for
a whole lot of homophobia that was played off for laughs, and
I mean, there was and lots of
racism
and all sort. I mean, transgendered,
anything
all
to do,
that stuff. It's you look back on that, and you're like, wow, we should change that. But I don't think we should. Just like we shouldn't go back and
we shouldn't go back and edit the movie. It's a historical document at that point.
At that point, right?
That is how things were at one point. That's what entertainment show was.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, I think we can all look back at the first Terminator movie, right? And I love the first Terminator movie, but the sex scene in that movie is just like so out of place. It is just out of nowhere. It makes no sense. And yes, they kind of tied it into the movie for later, and that John was his whatever. Who cares? That it was stupid, and we all know it was stupid. And it was a product of its times. There was not a movie that came out at that time, regardless of rating, almost, that didn't have a sex scene 2/3 of the way through the movie.
Right.
They all had them. So it's almost a relic of its time that you look back at, and to have it not in there, you're like, okay, well, it's kind of weird.
Yeah, there was an interesting sort of related talk about this on one of the IGN podcasts where somebody was asking, like, in video games, a lot of them give you the option in the menu to increase or reduce the amount of gore, like how much blood is splattering. Some of them give you language filters as well. They might bleep out bad language or just remove it entirely because it's interactive, and you can do that in a lot of video games, but not all, and it's not like mandated or anything. I mean, I can't say there's a right or wrong. Should people have options? I don't know. I mean, honestly, I just come back to the content creator. If the content creator says, I want to create this content and give people options, like
Yeah,
some of the
that's true.
video game makers do, then that's still holding to the artistic intent. They're saying this is actually what I envisioned, is that people could enjoy this in different ways if they so choose.
I
Whereas if it's
doubt
a
that's the artist's intent. I'll be honest with you. I think
right, it could be the production
that's the
studio
studio
mandates it.
saying, "Listen,
Yeah.
kids are playing Grand Theft
Right.
Auto. You got to put a filter on it."
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough. There's no easy answer on that, but
Oh, there's definitely no right answer. If you came to me and said, "I think that we should have the ability to choose exactly, how
Mhm.
much gore and sex and violence and bad language is in our movies, and we should be able to select that stuff," I'd be like, "Yeah, I mean, you make a good point."
Yeah.
So either way,
All right.
Brian. Brian says, if you've listened to the HG Guys HD TV and Home Theater podcast, which I have not, you'll have heard Brian's question on their show. Okay, let's see if we agree or disagree with him. They wanted to get our take too. So Brian says he just turned 40. He's feeling like he's lost connection with just listening to music. It was a big part of his life back in college. Oh, I hope they told you to get vinyl. It was a big part of his life back in college, and he fondly remembers his giant tower speakers and listening to CDs. But as time has passed, he's slimmed down his audio system, gone from an iPod to an iPhone, and now to streaming. And when he finally sat down recently in his home theater and streamed some music recently, he was bummed out as he didn't have nearly this visceral reaction to the music that he recalls having in his 20s. So what do we think could recapture some of that magic for him? He's toying with the idea of building a dedicated 2-channel system, going back to CDs, which you can get for dirt cheap on eBay, maybe even some vinyl. Is that crazy? And how do we listen to music? Is it just on in the background, or do we critically listen? And if we critically listen, do we stick with streaming, or do we find it worthwhile to use physical media? What's our take? Okay. There's a couple of things here. So how does he get that visceral reaction to music he recalls having in his 20s back again? Well, a big bag of weed will help you out with that. Because you want to put yourself back in the same mindset. Let's start with
we don't know that. We don't know that for sure. Not everybody does. I don't partake.
I'm just saying. Okay, so honestly here. Okay. You may have had some very intense moments with music back in your 20s, but I imagine that over at the sum of all the experiences you had with music is not that much different than what you're having right now. I mean, you can't just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to finally sit down in my home theater for the first time in years and listen to some music and expect to get the chills like you used to get the chills every once in a while. Sometimes that comes from repetition. Sometimes that comes from just being in the right headspace, or the music being the right volume.
What else is
whatever.
going on in your life?
Right.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I don't think that recapturing your youth is something that you can ever do. But what you can do is you can build a new experience that is similar, or maybe I would think superior to what you had when you were 20. And I would go a completely different direction than any of this other stuff. Now, first of all, to answer your question, when I'm listening critically, I use physical media.
Okay.
Almost always. And that's simply because I don't have Rob's little streaming service, blah, blah, blah crap. Okay. I don't have all the NOS drives and the plexes and all that. And I haven't encoded everything. At one point I put everything into iTunes, or most of my stuff into iTunes, and Apple sucks. So I can't stream anything to anything, and it all gets down converted to something else anyway. So it's just easier for me to use physical media. I have a little case full of discs that have actual CDs and DVDAs and SACDs in there that I use for my critical listening. So I use physical media for critical listening. And normally I'm not critically listening to the music. I'm critically listening to the speakers, because that's what I use it for. I don't often use it to listen to the music, because it's just the music. Most of my music is streamed. Just like you, I stream almost everything, and I enjoy it quite a bit. And it's mostly streamed in my car or over headphones as I'm working, and it's kind of a background thing, but it's on headphones. And therein is where I'm going to point you. I'm not going to point you towards getting a 2-channel set up and blah, blah, blah. I think you should go out and spend a stupid amount of money on a pair of headphones.
You don't even have to spend a stupid amount. There's some really nice headphones now. I mean, at prices that are high for what we normally think of for headphones, but it doesn't have to be utterly insane anymore.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that a lot of people think headphones, you spend $100 on headphones, you're like, oh my God, you spent $100 on headphones. Like, no, I think you should go out and spend like $200, $300, $400, $500 on some headphones. Get some real good ones.
Yeah.
Get the hardware to go along with it if you need to have a headphone amplifier to go along with it. And then rip your favorite CDs or whatever, or get some CDs. I don't think vinyl is the way to go, but if you want to play around with vinyl, I'm sure
Or, I mean,
if
there
you've
are
got the money
legitimately
to waste, you might as
there,
well just burn it. I swear, throw it in the
there are
garbage.
legitimately albums on vinyl that aren't even available like in any other
That's
way.
true.
So that's fair enough if that's what
Are
you
they
want to
worth
hear.
listening to if they're on vinyl? That's the real question.
Could be.
Oh
And I
my
mean,
God, the hate mails are already coming in.
I will have to say a lot of what is available on streaming content, it is dynamically compressed, unfortunately, which is the same for CD as well. Earlier on in CD, they did a nice job of retaining dynamic range, but as we've gone on, modern music has gotten worse and worse. We're getting down to like 2-3 decibels at the most difference between the quietest and the loudest thing on the whole album.
Drives me nuts, man, because you can feel it in your bones that it needs to be louder at this point, and I will find myself reaching to the volume knob to say, this part should be louder. I can hear it crescendo. It's not getting any louder, and I start turning it up. And pretty soon,
so I mean that's not the fault of your speakers or your playback system.
No.
But so there was one thing I did hear the HT guys talking about this, and actually it's funny because they agreed headphones is probably the way to go. But they did mention one thing that I loathe because it is completely false, which is the idea that your home theater system and your music system need to be two separate things. That a system that's great for movies will not necessarily be great for music. No, that's like saying this sound system is really good for sound, but it's not good for sound.
This car is good for driving, but it's not very good for parking.
Yeah, the range of frequencies that you can hear are the same whether it's music or movies. So
that's one of those things that's been repeated so often that people think it's true.
Yeah, it's a false truism.
I've been saying that from the very beginning of this podcast. So if you say that these speakers are good for music, and then these other speakers are good for home theater, what you're saying is that these are not good speakers.
Right, yeah.
Because if they were good speakers, they'd be good for everything. If they're good only for home theater, that means that they're just loud. Is that what you're going for?
I
don't know.
Reproduce the complex wave in the signal, whether it doesn't matter what the origin of it was. So if you're fine, I mean, the thing is, what you were hearing back in college might have been really inaccurate. In fact, it probably was. And if
a lot of money in college, I guess.
And it's like, if that's what you wanted, well, you can get back there with some EQ on what is probably a much more accurate system that you're listening to now. That might have something to do with it. But
this has happened on this podcast too, where people have said, "Oh, I had these, whatever speakers, and they were back in college, and I loved them, and they're the best selling things ever. Should I buy them again?" I'm like, dude, you're going to be so disappointed, but knock yourself out, because they're just, I mean, they weren't accurate. You love them because that was all you knew, but you know better now. You're never getting back to that. So innocence lost or whatever. You got to shoot past what you experienced when you were in high school or college.
On that front, what I would say, because I it's not that I don't want to, it's just a time thing. I've got television shows that I want to keep up on, and that eats up most of my time. So I don't do a lot of critical listening, but I will say what gives me an emotional reaction that isn't the same as what I had when I was much younger, but it's a fun emotional reaction, is concert Blu-rays, concert Ultra HD Blu-rays, because having the whole experience of, you've got the crowd noise, you're actually watching the musicians play, and you've got, I mean, the concert Blu-rays that they bring out, most of them have really well mastered sound and actually do have dynamic range, because they're
they have to
on a video disc.
Yeah, the only thing they've got going for them, I was like, listen, you better make the sound good, because it's a concert DVD.
I would maybe recommend looking into that, because there are some really nice concert Blu-rays out there.
Yeah. So. Justin has a 3.1 setup at the moment using a Bouchard.
Bouchard? I'm not sure. These are a speaker brand I've never heard of.
I've never heard of this. Yeah. S300 front, left, and right speakers with a B&W 600 series center. Okay. The sub is a SVS SB4000. Okay. And the receiver is an older Rotel RSX 1550. Dude, okay. This guy's got some SB4000. Okay. And the B&W, apparently he's got some money, but not enough money to have all the speakers match. So here we go. He'd like to add surround speakers, but he doesn't want any visible speaker wires. The floor is tile, and while he has a rug, it won't fully cover the wires, and he really isn't considering opening up any walls. So we've got some pictures of the room here. It is a It looks unfurnished, so maybe he's just moving into the place.
I'm not exactly sure. These are the images he sent, and he marked in red where he might be putting his surround speakers.
Yeah.
So yeah, one image is clearly unfurnished, and the other one has some furniture in place.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it looks like hardwood, but he said it's actually a tile floor.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. My friends have had that too. That's really common for people who have allergies.
Okay.
You know, they'll put this wood tile down that looks like wood, and they haven't. It's easier to keep clean and keep the dandruff.
That makes sense.
Stuff. All right. So he asked, is there a good wireless solution? His Rotel receiver does have pre-outs, but he doesn't have any sort of auto setup. So he's a little concerned about the latency. Can we make a recommendation? Well, we normally recommend, is it the one from Outlaw or the other one that
if
does
it's
this?
Just the transmitter and wireless transmitter and receiver, then yeah, I like the Outlaw one.
Okay. So for that, you would need an amplifier to go with that, or
the speakers would have to be either self-amplified or a separate amplifier for each speaker. That is one option, but there's another way that you can do this. Yeah.
Okay. Which other way?
Which is Amphony.
Okay.
Amphony. In this case, I would recommend to you their model 1800. Because what that does is it gives you one transmitter device, so that'll be next to your AV receiver, and it actually can, so it has a stereo 3.5 millimeter jack, so you could use the pre-outs, you'd use RCA to stereo 3.5 millimeter adapter plug, kind of like what you would plug into a headphone jack to get audio out of a headphone jack. This is just doing the reverse, it's feeding from the RCA into the stereo 3.5, so you could do that, or you could actually just use the speaker wire binding posts on the back of your Rotel, and those can connect directly to the transmitter unit of the Amphony.
Okay.
But then the Model 1800 gives you two separate wireless receiver and amplifier units.
Okay.
So given what he's looking at in his room here, where it doesn't look like you'd want to have wires running across the back of the room between the two surround speakers with one amplifier equidistant in between them or something, because that'd be like right in front of his door. So this would allow you to have one little wireless amplifier right beside each of your surround speakers, and then you could use whatever normal surround speakers you want. So I like that Amphony Model 1800. It's $200 on Amazon, but I think that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah. So he's considering getting a pair of JBL 305P studio monitors to use as his surrounds, thinking their self-powered design would be best for pairing with a wireless transmitter. Then you just have to plug the speakers into power, right? Should he go with the JBL monitors, or is there a better option? Like Rob said, if you wanted to go with this, you could use the Outlaw. That I mentioned.
But then you'd probably want two receiver units, which you can do.
Right.
But again, because if you only have one receiver unit, then there has to be a wire going from the receiver unit to each speaker.
Right.
So you can do two receiver units. That's okay, but that's extra cost. And then you aren't just plugging in the speaker, you're also plugging in the receiver unit. The receiver unit also needs power.
Right.
So
if you did it the way that Rob was saying with the Amphony, that one, you would just need one power cord, basically, for each little amplifier majigger. So
and then you could use
any speaker you want.
Yeah, you could get speakers that maybe match your existing speakers a little bit more closely. So
I don't know how. I don't know. I mean, I've never heard of these boot carts or whatever they're called.
Yeah, those ones I don't know anything about.
I wish you had sent a picture of them. But B&Ws aren't really targeting perfectly flat.
Oh no, they've got their own sound that they're aiming for.
So matching, it's and we've said this before in this podcast many times, that the surround speakers don't have to match as well as other ones. Especially, it looks like you're putting them in the back of your room anyway, so they're even further behind your head than they would normally be. But you do want something that at least has something to do, some sort of
if a sound goes around you, it doesn't really change how it sounds as it goes from front to back.
So you definitely want to try some things out, and you'll have many more options if you use the Amphony speaker.
Because then any normal speakers are an option for you that way.
Yeah. All right. Miguel on Facebook. Miguel has his theater set up in a small bedroom. He wanted to try his setup in a larger space, so he moved his theater into his living room, which is roughly 11.5 by 15 feet. But it's open on one side to the kitchen, so the entire space is about 2,600 cubic feet. With the right side being open, there's nowhere to mount his surround speaker, his right surround speaker, and he doesn't want speaker stands behind his couch. Is it okay to have the surround speakers behind him instead, or should he avoid the whole thing and go back to a small enclosed bedroom? Back to your room, boy. No. There's nothing wrong with this, dude. I mean, if you only have one pair of surrounds, as long as they're behind you, or they're supposed to be to your sides and a little bit behind you. If they're
Right.
to your sides and way behind you, well, I mean, they just have to play louder. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not optimal,
It's
but
not, fully ideal, but it's also not
it's
the end of the
fine.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you bought an HSU VTF2 Mark V sub as the option of being sealed with 2 port plugs, using just 1 port plug, or using no port plugs and having 2 ports open. What are the advantages, disadvantages to each port plug option, and which should he use? Generally speaking, I'm going to make sure I say this right,
Okay.
because it's been a while since I've dealt with port plugs. You plug the port because you want the sub to play lower, and you unplug the ports because you want the sub to play louder.
That's
Is that
more or
right?
less it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
in your new room, in your old room, you could have plugged the ports so
Yeah.
that
You
you
probably
got
could have sealed it, honestly,
yeah,
in a very small enclosed room. Yeah.
and gotten lower bass out of it at a lower volume. That would have been fine. But now that you're in this bigger space, you're probably going to want to unplug all these ports and get as much output as possible.
Although, I mean, 2,600 cubic feet total isn't huge. That's a
I
medium sized room.
I hear you. I bet it's not. It's open to his kitchen, man, which means as he taken into account all the hallways and everything else.
Right. There
You
might
know,
be more space than what he mentioned. Yeah,
yeah.
that's true. Yeah. So if you think about it, like if you were looking at the line of the frequency response, it's going to go, hopefully as a flat line across. And then as you get down to some low frequency, it's going to taper off and get quieter and quieter. The more ports that you have open, the higher that frequency is going to be where it starts to taper off, but the overall level of everything can be louder. And as you plug 1 port and then 2 ports, you'll go lower in frequency before it starts to do that little roll off thing, but the entire level will be quieter overall. So, yeah, I mean, in your case, I definitely wouldn't go sealed in the 2,600 cubic foot room. If you want the deepest extension, but it doesn't have to be super duper loud, then you could try the 1 port plug setting, because that actually lets the thing play right down to like 18 hertz or so. So that's kind of nice. But yeah, it'd either be 1 port or 2 ports. There's no right or wrong answer. You just have to decide, do you want it louder and maybe it only quote unquote plays down to like 22 hertz flat and then it rolls off below that? Or do you want it to be like flat down to 18 hertz, but overall it's a little bit quieter? You choose which out of those two you prefer.
I prefer that I hadn't accidentally gone back, and then now I have lost, and I'm trying to scroll, and my computer's
Well, I'll move
not
on to
doing
his
it.
next one then.
Thank
He
you.
mentions that he is visually impaired, but he'd still like to have a very good picture for his television. So he got a new Vizio 70-inch TV, and he'd like to know what we would recommend as far as the picture settings go.
Okay.
So I'm going to assume, since he said 70-inch, it's a Vizio, it's either the M series or the D series, because those are the only 2 series that offer a 70-inch model. So actually, on this one, since you might like something like, I'm assuming he has a screen reader that could read out for him. The way Ratings has done their picture settings, if you're listening to it through a screen reader, it should work very nicely. They actually talk right through the settings instead of like just giving a table or something that might be difficult to understand from a screen reader. They actually just write it out in full sentences. So I think that would work quite well for you. And if you actually follow their settings for a Vizio M series TV, which we have the link for that. So if you come to avrant.com in the show notes for this episode, which is number 608, when that goes up on Friday, we'll have a link to that. Or you can just head over to the Ratings website and look up a Vizio M series settings and have your screen reader read that to you, and it reads out in full sentences. And they go through the whole process in a logical order, and that should get you going good.
Right. So you tried to follow the Odyssey microphone positioning and setup tutorial on YouTube that we've recommended in the past from AV forums in the UK. But quite a lot of it is just visuals and not verbally described. So it was difficult for him to follow. Could we describe the correct way to position his Odyssey microphone during auto setup? You could actually probably find the interview we did with Chris Karyakakis from Odyssey on this podcast, where he talked about it as well. But generally speaking, what you want to do, the little microphone jobber thingy, you want to set that on, it's connected to a tripod or some other sort of device if you can,
like a microphone stand,
so that you can easily move it around. The first position you want to have it in is approximately where your head would be as you were sitting in your home theater, except without any surface within 12 inches of it. So yes, your head will be on the cushion. You cannot put the microphone on the cushion or near the cushion.
Do not rest the microphone like right on the seat back. Do not rest the microphone right in the seat. You want it on some kind of stand, approximately
the height of your head or your ears, and then forward enough from the back of the seat so that you have 12 inches, and then you want to make sure there's a line of sight to every speaker in the room.
Yeah, so imagine that there's like a 1 foot bubble around, a 1 foot radius bubble around the microphone, and nothing should be within that bubble. Ideally, you should have a nice 1 foot radius all the way around that microphone, and then if there were a straight line going from the tweeter of each speaker to the microphone, all of those should be a straight line, no obstruction in between any of them. And that might mean you even remove the seat back temporarily while you're doing it. People go, but wait, the seat's going to be there. No, you don't want to compensate for that. You want the direct sound coming from the speaker to reach that microphone unobstructed. So that's position number 1. All the other remaining positions, however many you do, 2, 3, up to a maximum of 8, should basically be move the microphone from that first position 2 feet to the left, take a measurement there, move it 2 feet to the right from the original position, take a measurement there, a couple of feet in front, a couple of feet behind, and
you can go higher if you want to.
A little bit higher, a little bit lower.
Yeah.
You're making kind of a bubble. In this case, like a 2 foot radius bubble.
I'll be honest with you. I don't even go that far. I probably go like a foot and a half to each side. Sure. Yeah. I'm not going from seat to seat. I mean, that's what it makes it sound like.
It
right?
does.
You're supposed to go from seat to seat. You're not really going from seat to seat. Now, you can, especially in a big room that's symmetrical and your couch is in the middle of the room. You know what I mean? And then all the seats are in between the speakers and everything else. Then maybe I'm a little bit more comfortable with that. But like in my room, where my couch is pushed up against a wall and one seat basically is directly in front of the right speaker, I don't want that. I want to have a perfect little bubble around the prime seat, and that's where I sit. That's where I sit, and then everybody else is on their own.
But yeah, you can kind of think of it as 2 bubbles. You got 1 foot radius bubble around the microphone. Nothing should be inside that bubble. And then you're moving the microphone within a 2 foot radius bubble so that you can get a nice spatial average of that whole area around that first position of the microphone. And yeah, clear line of sight from every speaker to the microphone at all times. And that's all you need to do for the Odyssey mic. I will just say the mic should be pointing straight up at all times. It shouldn't be like pointing straight forward or angled in any way. The microphone should be pointing straight up.
Chad's room is under some construction. He's trying to figure out his best options for speaker placement. He's marked some proposals and he'd like our take on his preliminary plans. And please note, he's drawn both of his subs at the front of the room, but those are just placeholders in the image. He plans to measure the bass response and reposition the subs as necessary. Well, you're going to put one in the front left, one in the front right. Okay. So it looks like he's got sliding glass doors or something like that on the right wall. The left wall seems to be more sliding glass doors or
there's some kind of sliding door over there, and then also the left wall is actually taller than the right wall, so the entire ceiling is pitched downward from left to right.
Then there's a half wall behind the area, but it's only just about as wide as the couch is. It's got sort of weirdly off-centered or different color, different width columns in it or something. So he's got his front left and he's got his speaker, his screen or image or TV or whatever at the front of the room, center channel underneath or above that, doesn't really say. Then he's got the subs, and then he's got the front left and right speakers. Then the Atmos speakers are 18 inches off the side walls into the room, and the surround backs. No, this is surrounds.
Just surrounds. And this is mainly what he's asking about. Yeah.
Way behind him on that little half wall, very, very low, and essentially in the same location that you would put surround back speakers almost.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. And if we look at a picture of the actual room, when we look at the little half wall, there's like a column on the. guess it's the right
The
side of
right
it.
side, yep.
Yeah, that is much thicker than the one on the left side because it looks like a support column. The other one is not. And then his room is pitched, but his Atmos speakers are actually on
soffits, really.
soffits on either side. So they are wider than the front left and right speakers by quite a bit. And okay, so that's sort of what we're going for here.
Yes.
All right, so there's a very large floor-to-ceiling window on the right side that prevents him from putting his surround speakers in the ideal position. His preliminary plan is to use the partial wall that is behind the seats to prevent the surround speakers. They're essentially where surround back speakers would go. He thinks that in the future, he might find a way to run flat speaker wire to his surround speakers on stands to either side of his couch, but for the time being, are those back locations okay? How can we make the best of this his available mounting options? Okay, so... I mean, the place doesn't even have carpet yet, dude. You could straight up wire them right now to be on stands on either side of your couch.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be this is literally the best time to do it.
Unless
I'm reading this wrong. I mean, it's still under construction. If you can't do it now, you can't do it. So do you have the couch already? Because if you do, then I would go ahead and right now wire that, and then also wire where you have, because those are great surround back.
Those locations. Are great for surround backs. Yeah, I mean, I will completely admit, like, looking at the sidewall locations would be tough. Although, no, I mean, that whole right hand side, there really isn't anywhere to mount
just glass. Yeah,
so that makes sense. But yeah, if you, I mean, the floor isn't even the finished floor yet. Now would be the time to run some wire for sure. Yeah. To where the surrounds would ideally go, and then
but what if you can't? What if he's just telling us he might run some speaker wire because he knows that's what we want to hear, and apparently we're too delicate to hear the truth. I mean, if that's where you can put them, that's where you can put them.
Correct.
I don't know that there's much else you can do.
I mean, the only other option would be to have the surround speakers up on the soffits, where the Atmos speakers are going to go. Yeah. Right? Isn't that that's about the only other option, really?
And honestly, I'm not against that. Putting these are the ones on the right side are not, but the one on the left, is it angled? It's very hard. It looks like it must not be angled. It must just be the way.
No, it's just optical illusion because there's the window above it. So
yeah. So I mean, putting to your right and left of your couch the prime elevation speakers in that surround location, I think is a better use of that space than Atmos. For me,
I mean, actually, you could have something like prime elevation speakers or similar to it, directly to the left and right of your seat, or maybe just slightly behind your seat location. And then you could still have top fronts and top rears also on the soffits that would actually be in front of and behind the surround speaker. You're still getting all the channel separation.
And then you have surround backs already wired.
And then you have surround backs already where you were proposing to put the surround. So you could go full 7.2.4 in here.
I would have to see that, because I feel like that's going to be too many. I think I think he's going to run out of soffit on the right side.
Really?
Yeah.
That soffit goes all the way down
on the right side?
On the right side.
No, not on the right side.
It comes all the way back to the support column that goes on that half wall behind him.
Let me see this again.
That is that is the whole length of the right side.
You're right. Okay, so where he's got his couch, I see what you're saying.
So yeah, I think you could have surrounds that, I mean, it's a little bit less than ideal that your surrounds are up as high as your Atmos speakers, but the sound that's being sent to them in the signal is still discrete. So it's not as though your surrounds are going to be playing Atmos sounds just because you happened to position your speakers up there physically. They're still playing their own discrete sounds. And you've got enough space in front and behind your seating location that if your surrounds are directly to your sides, your front Atmos speakers and your rear Atmos speakers could still have good separation between them and your surrounds that are directly to your sides. There.
I don't love it. I gotta be honest.
Don't love it? That's
I don't.
Looking at the situation or we're both in agreement, wire in the floor and put surround speakers on stands to either side of your couch.
That would be solution number one. Solution number two, to me, is surrounds up high, surrounds back behind. Forget about Atmos, or just have top fronts or top rears, or top fronts.
I mean, if you're going to do Atmos, I'd rather have four, but
I agree. Yeah. I agree, but I think that I'm having a hard time believing that he's going to get that it's not going to get really muddy with the surrounds being the same on the same plane as the Heights speakers. Like if you could put them in the actual
Maybe.
ceiling, I have a hard time believing it's not going to get muddy up there. But if you really want it, you could do it. So
we've given some proposals.
Yeah. So we've already suggested previously that he mount his Atmos speakers on the soffits on either side of his room. According to Dolby, they should ideally be a little bit closer. So what do you think about this proposed placement? Well, if you can't get them in the ceiling, this is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But if you can't,
I like these for Atmos just fine.
This is going to be fine. So how does he determine what labels to give the Atmos speakers? Can he freely configure them in any modern Atmos receiver? He's a little bit confused by the names. Top, front height. Are they the same thing, or are there super strict positions and names that he needs to worry about? Well, it's all about angles.
Elevation angles.
So they are to the side a little bit more than they're supposed to be, but generally speaking,
such is life sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, his room's a little bit taller, at least on the left side than this on the right. But as far up as these speakers are, it looks like to me it's probably about 8 or 9 feet.
I'm pretty sure he mentioned in his email that the Atmos speakers would actually be at 8 feet where he's proposed to.
So it's about 5 feet in front of you, 5 feet behind you.
Yeah,
it's kind of where it goes. So you would have 5 feet for top front, 5 feet in front of you, top front, right next to you, your surround, and then 5 feet behind you, rear, top rear.
Yeah, because the elevation angles. So technically, front heights. Oh shoot, I forgot to look that up. What is that? So I know the minimum is a 30-degree angle elevation, and then the maximum is for front heights is I forget the exact number, but they actually end up overlapping a little bit. But like top fronts aren't supposed to be as far forward, like at as low an elevation angle as front heights might be. So they aren't exactly the same thing. They're slightly different angle ranges. So if you fall within one angle range, you'll call them front heights. If you fall within the other angle range, you'll call them top fronts. But honestly,
there's a little bit of overlap too.
There's a little bit, and there's a fair amount of overlap, in fact, in between the. But as far as how your Atmos renderer in your AV receiver is going to steer the sounds, it ends up ultimately being the same, which is this is supposed to be above you and in front of you and on your left, or this is supposed to be above you and behind you on your right. And whether you said I have top rears or rear heights, it's still going to be above you and behind you to your right. So it effectively doesn't make a huge difference. But yeah, you can absolutely just play with that in your AV receiver. Although when you change the name, you end up having to run Odyssey again or whatever your auto setup was. So if they're in front of you and above you, call them top fronts, basically.
We'll do one more. Boschko already has an APC G5 surge protector and power filter that he's happy with. He'd like to add UPS battery backup, and he already has the G5 for power protection. He'd like the battery unit to be small and cheap. What we recommend? Not Surge X, because they're real expensive.
That's expensive, yeah. Yeah, there are some options. I think the one he'll end up liking best, because it's not too huge, and it's definitely the least expensive. You can find it for about $82 right now. And actually, I like to go to B&H Photo for APC backup units. They tend to actually have stock or tell you when stock is coming back in. But yeah, the back UPS 850 is a pretty nice unit. It's not super powerful, but he mentioned in his email that it's like he really just wants the ability to shut things down properly when the power goes out. He's not trying to actually run his whole home theater off the battery for any great length of time. So
I found out that on my APC, every time the printer kicks on, it fluctuates the power just enough in the APC that it kicks everything to battery back up for a second, which kicks off Daisy's light. So I have
because that's not on battery backup.
It was on battery backup, but any fluctuation with that light, it goes and it basically turns off, and it takes about 15 minutes before it'll come back on again. So I plugged her light directly into the outlet just to stop that from happening. But it still happens every time the printer kicks on. It draws enough power because it's a laser printer. It draws enough power to screw everything up. But none of the computer shut down anymore, so I'm loving that. APC really does work well.
That APC back UPS 850, that gives you 6 outlets that are battery protected. It has a total of 9 outlets, so 3 of them are surge protection only. Now, just looking at the image, it's probably a little bit bigger than what you might look at. Remember, those are 9 outlets in there, and they're spaced far enough apart, some of them for wall warts. So it's not super tiny, but you got to remember there's a lead acid battery in all of these things. Yeah. So they got to be of a certain size. Now, if you want really small, they do have a lithium ion battery model, but it's $300.
Right.
So that doesn't fit the cheap category, and that only gives you 4 outlets
You
that
can
are
have
battery
small, or
protected.
you can have cheap. You can have both.
That's right. So, I mean, for most people, like if you didn't already have a G5, I'd be pointing most people to the APC J25. Right now, they're actually on back order, but there will be more stock. Those go for $250. They give you 6 battery backup outlets and 2 that are actually high current. So that's nice to maybe plug your amplifier or your subwoofer into, because you don't want those on a voltage regulated battery backup outlet anyway, and you do want the full 15 amps to be able to get through to any high powered amplifier. So that's one nice thing that the J25 has, but it's like a full size unit. You know, it's like the whole 17 inches wide unit that would fit into a regular component space. So it doesn't exactly fit the small criteria, and it isn't exactly cheap at $250, although it's not crazy overpriced. It's a really nice unit. But yeah, so the back UPS 850, I think, is the one he'll favor.
All right, I think we'll save the rest of these. Chris's is not very long, but we'll save them.
Maybe just hit that, because we're otherwise going to leave 6 behind. So
Whatever.
let's try and hit Chris's real quick.
All right, I'm very tired. Chris, what's a good reference for determining which subwoofers will work best in a given room size? So we've talked about this a lot, different room sizes and that sort of thing, and we kind of ballpark it. And for me, you know, it's almost like at this point, it's almost my feel. You know, it's like how you go into the mechanic, and the mechanic's like, "Give me the whatever," and he calls for like whatever specific socket, and you're like, "How do you even know?" He's like, "I don't know, I just know." And that's sort of how I do it. But there are a bunch of charts that are out there that say, okay, from this cubic foot size to this cubic foot size, this is considered a small room. And, you know, we will rate our subwoofers. So Audioholics does that. Yes. And they have small, medium, large, and
extreme.
Extreme, is that what they call it?
Yeah. Yes.
And every subwoofer they rate gets put into one of those rating categories. So you know, if your room falls within this, anything that is rated for your room or larger will work.
So they call it their they call it their Bassaholics guide. If you're Googling it, or we will have the link at avrant.com if you'd like to look it up. So yeah, Audioholics has their Bassaholics guide. And so yeah, they identify the cubic footage of the space and put it into the categories of small, medium, large, and extreme. And then he was asking, like, you know, we often reference SVS, and that's because off the top of our heads, we know pretty well which category the SVS subs fit into. And since we recommend them frequently, that's an easy reference for us. But he's like, what about other brands, other models of subs? And thankfully, a lot of places are listing either the CEA 2010 measurements or something very close to that. So it's not too difficult. I mean, it might take a little bit of time, but it's not too difficult to compare the CEA measurements from different brands of subwoofer models, say to the SVS ones if you want to, or just to the Bassaholics guide that Audioholics has written up there. And that gives you a pretty darn good idea of, okay, this has roughly this amount of output at these frequencies, and that should be enough for a given room size. So it's a very good resource that way.
So he says we've talked about pressurizing rooms with bass, and we've mentioned that if you have a wide open space, you probably don't even want to pressurize the whole space. Is that because it would be too loud? Are we saying that in a small sealed room, you'll get bass pressurization at low volume? And why does the size of the room matter when it comes to whether or not you want to pressurize it, other than obviously needing much higher output subwoofers in a much larger room? So, okay, so to pressurize the bass, the pressurize a room means that, you know, the air within the room is physically, I mean, it's not just going past your ears. The entire room is full of the bass waves. Essentially, they're being redirected all over the place and doing their little thing. It is a visceral, tactile feeling. You will feel the air moving against you. You will feel the rumbling in your stomach. And to do that, you have to pressurize all the air in the space. So yes, it takes a much more volume, much higher output to make that happen in a much larger space.
Oh, I see. Well, yeah, it takes more air displacement because there simply is more air in a much larger space. Yeah.
So to get that same, I mean, you may be measuring, like with your little SPM meter at your seat, you may be measuring at full reference volume right now, but it doesn't feel the same. That's because you're not pressurizing the entire space to that. So you're sitting close to the subwoofer or whatever. But, you know, the reality is, a lot of times we're talking about this, it's because when you're pressurizing that entire space, think about all the rest of the space that's not you sitting in there watching that movie.
That's the main thing. It's
You know,
the everyone else other than you. You might enjoy it very much having a fully pressurized, huge, wide open space.
10,000 cubic foot,
Yeah.
great room, open kitchen, everything, and every dish in your kitchen is rattling. You're like, honey, can you stop all that rattling? I'm trying to watch Transformers 6, the suckening. It's just you're not going to have a good time.
Yeah, I mean, technically speaking, we measure sound output in sound pressure level. So pressure is going to be the same, like sound pressure level is what gives us our decibel level.
Right.
That's how we measure how loud it is. So in terms of volume, it's going to be equal volume. It's going to be equal sound pressure level, but it's just to have the same amount of pressure in a much larger room, you need to move a whole lot more air. So that requires the much larger, much higher output subwoofer. That's the one part of that. But yeah, it's not so much that you, the listener, I mean, if you live all alone and you happen to have a huge room and you can afford the subwoofers that have the displacement capability to move that much air to give you the same sound pressure level as in a much smaller room, that's fine. We aren't against that. What we're mostly at is that the people who are saying, I have a wide open space, they're not living all by themselves,
Right.
which means that everyone in that house is experiencing that sound pressure level everywhere that the air is capable of moving, and most people don't want that. They only want the person in the theater isolated to be experiencing that sound
In the
pressure
theater
level.
area.
And
whereas
everyone else doesn't have to experience it.
regular speakers, they can their sound is much more contained within that area. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not really, but it as it goes out into the rest of the house,
It gets quieter with
it gets
distance.
quieter with distance.
Yeah.
But to get that bass to pressurize the entire room so that you're getting the full reference
It's
volume,
the same pressure everywhere.
and it's the same volume in every corner of that space, and you can't afford the amount of blue tack it will take to keep everything from rattling. You're talking forks, spoons, like drawers, everything will rattle. So,
I mean, one way that you go to an IMAX theater and you want the full bass pressurization, the same sound pressure level you would have in your nice contained little dedicated home theater at home, you want that same sound pressure level at a full IMAX theater, but so does everyone else at the IMAX theater. So that's okay. Right? But you come home and probably anybody else living in your house doesn't want to.
The only times I've ever had
voluntarily
walking out of a theater have been at IMAX theaters. I'm like, dude, that is just
too much. That's full reference volume. That's why we say most people probably don't want full reference volume.
Yeah. All right, that's it for this week. So let's thank our listeners of the week, Chad and
Well, I just
Brian.
want to mention the people who are on the list, so that they know that they're on the list. We have Travis D, John Z, Jeb B, Aiden C, and Brian P. I like how all the last initials rhymed with each other, because letters do that sometimes. But you gentlemen are on the list, and I did get some emails that came in today on the Monday, so next week.
So I thank our listeners of the week, Chad and Brian, who went to www.avrant.com and clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link to leave us a PayPal donation. We want to thank our 68 patrons over at patreon.com, including Ilongo, for supporting us financially. Thank you, guys. Those monies will go into our coffers to help pay for our hosting fees and other things.
Yeah, Chad, Brian, thank you very much for the PayPal donations. That's at avrant.com. And thanks so much to our 68 patrons over at patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. And Ilongo, thank you very much for being one of them.
And Miguel, I want to thank you for talking us up to HSU about your subwoofer purchase.
Yeah, Miguel, congrats on that VTF2 Mark V, and thanks for talking us up to HSU.
For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.